Hey moms and dads, this is Dr. Scott Haggerty with Elite Family Chiropractic. And hey, did your child have a traumatic labor and delivery? And so what I mean by that is, did your child have a lot of interventions? Epidural, Pitocin, cesarean section, vacuum, forceps. Have you ever wondered if the birth process may have affected them as a baby, their health, their development? What I want you to understand is that so much of what the research is showing right now is that is exactly what it does. And I can tell you because I've seen this firsthand as a doctor and as a parent. There are research studies that are being done in mass right now that are pointing directly back to the role of birth process as being what they call a trigger event for triggering a stress response inside of a child's nervous system. If you look at kind of the whole picture, right, what they're saying is that there is this perfect storm of increased stress during pregnancy for mom, coupled with the stress of the labor and delivery in mom, so that the baby now is stuck with a fight or flight system that is locked on. Nervous system rules. You cannot be in growth and development at the same time. So when something like a traumatic birth process, high intervention birth process, coupled with a stressful pregnancy, when those things come together, what they do is they create a recipe for a developing nervous system to be locked into stress mode and seeing symptoms that progress over time. And let me explain to you what that means. So we lived this firsthand. So when our daughter was born, nine and change years ago, my wife was under a tremendous amount of stress because she was in chiropractic school, national boards, clinic requirements, just on a million miles an hour and a million responsibilities, stressful pregnancy. We planned for a perfect labor and delivery, but boy, it sure did not happen that way. So when labor and delivery occurred, right, she progressed quickly, strong contractions, and got very stuck. Spent 8 hours at 8 centimeters dilated, and then had a very, very traumatic labor and delivery process that led to epidural and Pitocin, but she also had a ton of tearing. My daughter had a very difficult birth process that led to her having facial bruising, torticollis, horrible latch, horrible sleeper, constipation, and those symptoms went on and on and on to where she could barely sleep. She was constantly crying. She was always dealing with something for the first year plus of her life. When she became a toddler, the constipation didn't resolve. We started to see new symptoms coming out, like big time meltdowns, temperament issues, very, very quick on the trigger. That led to 3 and 4 year old, we're starting to see meltdowns occurring because her fight or flight nervous system was locked on. She was showing signs of anxiety. She was starting to sim, and we're starting to see this cascade of events. And so many of you have seen these same exact circumstances happen in your own children. And many of you, probably like us, have wondered why. Well, I had the grace of having a mentor of mine pour in and say what I was missing. And what I was missing was the role that these processes played early on in my daughter's life that got her nervous system locked into fight or flight. Instead of being locked into a balanced state of growth and development and healing, stress is necessary. When your child's nervous system is stuck on the gas pedal, they can't spend time like they should in healing and recovery and cognitive development mode. And so when you look at the way that this affects our kids, right, every kid's going to be affected differently because no two brains are the same. But when things like a traumatic birth process occur, if we don't do something to change the way that the nervous system works in that child, then the consequences will start to come out month after month, year after year when they evolve. And they develop into new and differing challenges as the brain changes and the brain develops. But in many cases, what you see is the brain gets stuck. It's not moving forward. And what we see is that the fight or flight nervous system becomes better at being on all the time. So we start seeing things like when kids are having temperament issues, right? By the time they're toddlers, we're starting to see meltdowns, and they tend to go from 0 to 60 like this. And as they get older, they become more and more and more and more ingrained in that process. You tend to see they have more difficulty when they get stressed staying calm. It takes them longer to calm down. The meltdowns get longer. The temperament issues get longer. The need for stimulation, proprioceptive seeking, movement seeking becomes more because their brain's not getting the stimulation it's supposed to from the inside up to the brain. So they seek it externally. So they flap their hands, they move, they run into things, they need deep hugs because they're not getting the stimulation they need to calm themselves. So they seek stimulation to calm them. And so when a child's nervous system is requiring that kind of a stimulation, it is a warning sign to you, mom and dad, that they're not getting the calming that they're supposed to from their body, because our brain actually has natural calming mechanisms that come from our extremities and from our spine. And one of the things that I wasn't even aware of when we started really looking how to help our daughter was how powerful the influence was of the spine on the brain. And so for those of you who have children that are in OT, you may have heard this term before. Our most important of all of our senses is one that most people have never heard of. It's called proprioception. Proprioception is known to be our movement sense. It's why I can touch my fingers to my nose and not have to stare at my fingers. It's the reason I can stand on one foot and balance myself, because that proprioceptive sense tells me where I am in space. It is in every joint extremity in the body, and it's really, really dense in the spine. So much so that 40% of those nerves live in the extremities, 60% of those nerves live in the spine. And so our brain is dependent upon this feedback from these nerves to tell us where we are in space, but secondly, to organize all sensory input to the brain. If parts of the extremities or parts of the spine stop moving the way that we're supposed to, we lose that information. But there is this theory called the gate theory. If you want to look it up, here's the general crux. If you lose motion in a part of the spine, then what ends up happening is not only do you lose that feedback that organizes sensory input, but when it's stuck, it also triggers a stress response that ascends to the brain. And that stress response, the longer that it's there, the more that it starts to cause irritation to us. So think about this. For those of you that have dealt with headaches in your life, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you feel that sense of irritation, that sense of disorganization, that sense of cloudiness, that sense of stress that comes when you're about to get a headache. And then boy, when it goes over the edge with the headache, you really feel the effect of it. And then what it does is it makes you very irritable. It makes you very crabby. It makes you very short-tempered. It messes with your memory, how you process all the sensory input. And guess what? Those headaches all come from your neck. Parts of the spine that have stopped moving, stop giving you normal sensory feedback, and it's disorganized. Now, if you step back and think about when a baby enters the world, okay, and they have an intervention-based delivery that requires more force, more torque, and more traction, and just to give you a reference, in a standard vaginal delivery, right, no interventions, the amount of force that goes into a baby's neck is 20 to 40 pounds of axial traction with lateral torque and rotation, okay? So that amount of force in a newborn who has no musculature that's developed to go and stabilize them in their neck. So think about that there is a strong possibility that there's probably going to be some non-pathological injury. Now, if you have a child that has intervention, know that those numbers go up pretty dramatically. If you have a vaginal delivery with intervention, those numbers can go as high as 40 to 80 pounds in a vaginal delivery of axial traction with lateral bending. You add in things like a vacuum extractor, take those numbers up by another 20 pounds. You add in a C-section, 40 to 80 pounds, peaking over 100 if there's a vacuum or a forceps introduced. The more time, the more force, the more difficulty there is, the more time that baby's nervous system is in stress mode. And so when we look at those impacts that there is in the nervous system, the impact there is in the spine, if we don't do something to get the spine moving again, then what it does in the background, it creates this nonstop ongoing stress response from those earliest developmental phases of life. And if we don't get the brain to calm down, then the brain gets really efficient at being stressed. So we start seeing behaviors that begin to evolve. So with my daughter, one of the things that we saw was that she had all of this stress behavior so early, the colic, the reflux, the poor sleep, the crying, the poor latching. And we didn't understand how deeply rooted these things were becoming in her nervous system until later on. Had I known then what I know now, I would have reacted entirely differently. I would have made sure that we did a lot more assessment, a lot more evaluation of my daughter right away, got her scanned like we do with our scans here, and I would have had her adjusted more often, because knowing the impact that had on her body and her nervous system, and also knowing the counteracting effect that an adjustment has. See, research is also really clear on this too. When you adjust the spine of an individual, it directly affects the brain, and it affects this area of the brain called the cortex. The prefrontal cortex is what controls all cognition, all higher function, all calming of the brain, all sensory processing, every piece of executive function. It is the counterpart to stress. Because when we adjust the spine, we activate the cortex, it shuts down the stress areas of the brain. That's why when we adjusted our daughter the right way at the right level, using scans and evidence to guide us, and we watched her nervous system change and calm down over a span of 4 to 6 months, it's because we had evidence to tell us that her nervous system was changing. Had I had that when she was a baby, I would have changed everything about how I cared for her. I would have cared for her, number one, at the right level. I didn't know, I was guessing until I had the information, like many of us do, because I know many of you are looking for resources and questions and you want help. But you're also saying, what are we missing? Why have we not found the resources? And I will tell you, for the vast majority of you, this would be it. Because for us, when we saw the changes that our daughter went through over a 4 to 6 month span, it was mind blowing. We saw her symptoms, her behaviors change so much that she went from a girl who had so many struggles to a little girl who was calm, reacting appropriately in that 4 to 6 month span. And so moms and dads, if you have sat and thought, what is going on? What are we missing? I will tell you that if you have not checked out getting your child assessed by a pediatric chiropractor like myself, then that may be the thing that you're missing. So if you're in the Cleveland area, you have questions, reach out to us. Go to www.elitefamilychiros.com. Drop us your questions and comments there. You can also put questions and comments underneath the video. If you don't follow our page, make sure you follow us and like us. If this video is valuable for somebody that you love, please share it with them. So if you want to get your child in for an evaluation, so we have a $47 voucher evaluation where you can come in, have your child evaluated and scanned, get all the information, get your questions answered, then we can talk about a plan to help to get your child living life the way that they should be, just like we did for our daughter. All right, guys, God bless you. Have a great day and be elite.